presentation at XP or Agile. I'm just showing you the ones that we've used that have been very effective. And so staying agile on the Northern Plains. And this is the Northern Plains portion of the presentation. So yeah, I'm in Fargo, North Dakota, and this is actually March from a couple of years ago. So a little bit different than Biloxi, Mississippi. And this is after the friendly snowplow came by and blocked the nice path I just got them doing. But it's not always cold. This is actually from our lake cabin last summer in western Minnesota, and this is a typical sunset. And last summer, a nice hot air balloon came by, and I thought this group would appreciate this view. So on to the XP Agile demonstration. These are the primary methods that we use. Domain model experts. They're very important. You know, I've seen where developers seem to think they know better than the people using the software, and you get in trouble with that. So domain model experts, top 10 lists, that the domain model experts pretty much set your priorities and let them do it. Pair programming, stand-up meetings, test-driven development, small, frequent, incremental releases, make it work, make it right, make it fast. And these are the projects I've been involved in. First one, TCIS. It's a healthcare application, total care information system. The next one was a retail video express rental application. The next one is a patient accounting system for healthcare for Per Se Technologies. And then the last one is again, a point of sale inventory system for a retail store. TCIS was a project started out in 1995. That was actually the first Smalltalk project I was a part of. The team consisted of domain model experts. So we had some clinicians with pharmacy, nursing, and ambulatory care backgrounds. We had an application architect, which actually was James Foster back here. Project leader, developer, that was myself. And then Keith Battles, I work with Keith, and I still do. He was on the team too. And this application was a community-wide personal health record application. So it shared patient health data among different healthcare facilities and professionals. So the scenario of, you know, you go to the doctor and he says, okay, tomorrow go to the hospital, and then when you get out of the hospital, they say go to the pharmacy and then go get some physical therapy. Well, these might be completely separate buildings, all without a community, and every time you go to one of them, they say fill out this health history form. Well, what the clinicians did, they wanted to have a way where you did one health history form, and then it would get scanned in, brought into the system, and then all these different clinicians and facilities had the data there already, and you could update it as needed. And this was using VSC and Gemstone. We used Access for reporting. Actually, one of our clinicians on the team, he loved Access and loved reporting, and we said, great. So we just basically fed him data, and he went crazy on the report, so that was great. It was successfully installed and used in 2 locations by 2001. We had much bigger plans, but we actually merged with another health system, and they were using an application from a company called Cerner, and they're big. We were small, so they won. I think they had like 10,000 customers, and they're worldwide, and they said, what, homegrown stuff? No. So anyway, we lost that battle at Cerner, but the application was wonderful. And this, I didn't have a running model of this application. It's been years since I've worked on it, but I did find a manual. And here it was. So we started in 95 and was piloted in Mesa, Arizona in 97. So within 2 years, we actually had something up and running and usable. And I think in 99, we had it in the second location, and then, you know, it got shut down in 2001. But we actually were gonna have it running in about 11 locations. So this kind of gives you an idea. I pulled this out of the manual too. So it was a tab control application, and then each list box had its own editor. So it would capture, allergy, diagnosis, immunizations, meds, and then of course the various other tabs had a whole bunch of other observations and things like that too. So the XP methods we used, we would meet with our domain model experts, all these clinicians, and we'd do that at least weekly. We'd let them fill out the top 10 lists for the development team. We would add and commit our changes to the source code daily. So we didn't let someone just say, okay, I'll take that one, and you're off for a week, and then try to check it back in, and more than likely someone stomped on your code or it's stale already. You took things down, we broke it down in small pieces where we expected it to go back into the source code and you're done by the end of the day, or second day at least. And we needed to do this because we were doing at least weekly builds, sometimes 2-3 times a week we do a build. And then we demo those changes back to the domain model experts before our staff meetings. We did a lot of pair programming. Again, 2 heads are better than one. You write better code. We keep the developers communicating, and how often are you doing something on your own? You go, geez, is that right? Or is there a better way? And then if you have 2 people agreeing on how you did something, more than likely it's done better. We had daily and weekly stand-up meetings. The project manager would kind of meet with the other programmers daily just to make sure you're still on task and everything's going well. And then, weekly we would do the entire team and demo what we did from the top 10 list, and then a new top 10 would get created. And this was all part of the small, frequent, incremental releases. Changes went out to our users very fast. We actually would spoil our users. They'd expect things to be, within a week of an approved change. A week or 2. And, we didn't have this quarterly release thing. People, as we would complete the top 10, that would be the next runtime. Again, because we didn't have big releases, we had, way easier problem with it, fixing any problems that were found. If you had 200 bug fixes and something went wrong, you're investigating 200 different things. Here, it wasn't a big deal. And, so our runtimes consisted of VSE runtime on the client, as well as gemstone fileouts, with Topaz scripts on the server. And of course, we went with the mantra: make it work, make it right, make it fast. Get something out for the domain model experts to see and to use, get their feedback, and go back for more changes until it's right. And performance tune is needed after the applications are working correctly. And so you knew how it should be, now you got to get it fast, just to make sure it still works. Okay, the Take-Two video point of sale and warehouse application. This is a 2-person moonlighting project. As we were losing our jobs at Lutheran Health System, we had some free time on our hands. They basically said, great, your application's working, too bad you can't make any more changes. So we had some bored, angry people, and I think James got tired of me complaining all the time, so he said, Tim, I think I got something for you to work on it. So, and we actually put a bid in on this video application. James heard of a fellow that needed some new software. We put a bid and we got it. And so we started working on it, and so in 2000 we did this, and we found out there was actually 2 parts to the application. There's a main warehouse that did inventory control of all the available titles for these stores to rent, and it would track inventory for each point of sale store. It would create push-pull lists for these point of sale inventory lists, and then there was the point of sale side. It would keep lists of all the inventory for a given store. It would process customer rental transactions. It would report back the best and worst rentals, and it would create inventory lists to update back to the warehouse. And this was actually installed in over 200 locations. And this was written in Dolphin, Access, SQL Server, and Crystal Reports. The Access was the database we used for the point of sales. It was pretty lightweight, single user application. And then SQL Server was on the warehouse. This kind of just gives you an idea. This is use the Dolphin application. This is the work screen they use for rental. And here this Bob guy was a bad guy and has overdue rentals, and the number of tapes out, rental count, and that type of thing. So what Agile methods did we use for this? Well, we didn't, this is a part-time job, mainly weekends, evenings. So it wasn't like attack it full-time every day like our TCIS application, but we approach it the same way. We had domain model experts, and this time it wasn't a clinician, it was some guy that knew about video rentals, and he was the business manager. And we had him create top 10 lists, and we would do at least a monthly bill, usually every couple weeks. Then as we would pull things off the top 10 list, again, it was just the same thing. We'd go back to him and give him a new runtime and let him check it out. And this application we pair programmed when possible. Again, same reasons. When it gets down to two guys, a lot of times you didn't pair program that often, but we did when we could. Again, small, frequent, incremental releases. This worked here too. We got changes back up to them quickly. And again, you found your problems faster and you could fix them quicker, and no patches. If there's a problem, you fix it and you put on an entire new release. Again, we spoiled them. They'd expect these changes to come back quickly. And we had separate releases for the warehouse and the point of sale, since they were pretty much separate applications. We did have S units for this, but we weren't really doing test-driven development. We did have some basic sanity testing for the QA with the S units. And again, make it work, make it right, make it fast. We would get something back out for the domain models to use and see, get their feedback, until it was right. And then again, we would performance tune as needed, after things were working correctly. And a lot of times, you can't performance tune right away because sometimes it's hard to know what's going to be slow until they're using it. A lot of times it's not even slow until after they're using it for a year. When certain collections get big, you go, oh wow, yeah, that's an issue. And you may not see that right away. Business One Healthcare Management Information System. This one I probably could have spent an hour and a half talking about, but this one's going to take up most of the time, and I'm going to try to whip through it as fast as I can. We were losing our jobs at Lutheran Health System, and again, James, he knows everybody, I guess. He knew someone that needed a Smalltalk team down in Atlanta to work on this application. And so we actually started working on this project while we were Banner Health System employees. And this was a full-blown patient care management billing system. It had the ADT, admit, discharge, transfer functionality with its own editors or through an HL7 interface feed. Are people familiar with healthcare applications in this audience case? HL7 is a pretty much industry standard interface format used for transferring data back and forth between other healthcare applications. The system has an insurance payer contract modeling in it, which can get pretty tricky because this actually will show expected reimbursement for different insurance payers, also what the patient's responsibility are for every claim. So, if you're billing a certain amount and you don't get paid the amount you think, the system will flag it and say, okay, something's up here. And as medical records coding, I don't know, again, healthcare, you have to put these procedure and diagnosis codes on claims in order to get reimbursed, and of course the system can do that. Had workflow management, so users, whether a registered clerk or a medical records person or a biller or a cash poster or whatever, the various people that use in the application, they have their own defined work queues. Of course, it does billing, electronic for insurance, as well as paper, and also paper guarantor statements, cash posting. Again, you can do electronic or manual cash posting as for insurances and guarantor. Complete charge and payment general ledger interface, successful. Okay, it's successfully installed and running in 5 hospitals as of right now and numerous physician offices. I'm only saying 2001 to 2004 because this is the latest version of the application, and that's when we became part of the team officially. So it was VSC. They had a version 1 that we never worked on much, and they neglected that thing so bad it was almost like a conversion from a foreign system to the new system. It was just, so I'm not even going to go there. Then it was VAST to 2004 today. I'm still working on this as my full-time job. And we have a SQL Server database. This kind of gives you a look and feel of it. This is the desktop, and this is just the primary desktop. There's other desktops when you click these buttons, and then plus these buttons have other editors and things, so it's a pretty big deal. This kind of gives you a look this is just the registration screen. So this is the registration tab. Again, it's a tab control application. Each tab has its own editor on there or more. So you get the payer information, where you can add charges or who the doctors are and that type of thing. So XP Agile methods used for Business One. Well, we had several challenges to become Agile in this project. We had to implement XP Agile to a non-Agile Smalltalk team. The Per Se team, when we merged with them, they had their own QA department, they had business analysts, they had 7 existing Smalltalk programmers, 4 of which were the original members of the team. The other 3 didn't have quite as much experience or say on how things should run. Then they had 2 DBAs. At that point, they were claiming to be SQL Server and Oracle, but they were mainly SQL Server. And then the Fargo team was a pretty lean group. There was 3 of us that were doing Smalltalk, and we had 1 DBA/report writer. So the new version of the application, so like I said, they had this old version out there that they knew they needed to get the one customer they had off of it. But they had this new version that wasn't ready to go yet. This thing was in trouble. They invested lots of money in it, threw lots of consultants at it, and it was just spiraling downward. They were losing more ground. The more bodies they were throwing at it, it just wasn't working. So Per Se wanted us, because they knew we had some pretty good experience doing Smalltalk and getting applications installed, and plus they still wanted to throw more bodies at this problem. The Per Se developers, they were into this quarterly release thing, and then if there was problems, they applied patches to the release. It was just, so they're working on multiple versions of the source code. They had a remote development team, and they didn't submit their changes to the repository very frequently. Source code conflicts were very frequent. Basically, they had a VSE environment loaded locally on each of their computers, and about once every month or 2, they would try to resync up with everyone else. And so they would just try to mush their code back into the one repository on the server, and then that could take a week or something, and then they'd copy it all back out and start over on the next round of changes. It just didn't sound good. So anyway, packaging, versioning the code base, and runtime building was quite challenging in their world. One of the challenges they had is they did not want to be XP and Agile, and they did not want any advice from these new Fargo guys. Basically we knew everything they were doing was wrong, and they didn't agree and they didn't care. But one thing they knew, their application was incredibly buggy. Fix one thing, break 2 more. They relied heavily on their QA team for testing. It was pretty much manual testing only. And I think they did have some automated tests, but they were basic sanity tests. And because they would change the code so often, those tests would break, so they were pretty much rendered them useless. The existing staff would very often just slam in code to the repository without even testing it at all, just to say they got it done. You know, so one of these bug counter things. It's like, okay, well, I just finished that one, isn't that great? And so saying it was completed was often more important than just to say, you know, to making sure it worked. So this new group, it seemed very dysfunctional at best. It's not what I was expecting from a large group of experienced programmers. A lot of these guys have been programming in Smalltalk for 8 years or so. And I guess my experience was coming from, I kind of learned Smalltalk and Agile and XP all at the same time, so I kind of thought everyone else did. I guess I was a little naive. Just because you're Smalltalk doesn't mean you're Agile or XP. You can still do things the wrong way. So what were we going to do? You know, we were stuck with these guys that pretty much said, fine, you can help us, but fall in line. And we knew that was the entire wrong thing to do. Well, we did the only thing we knew how to do. Okay? We found our domain model experts, and those were the business analysts. Okay? The business analysts on this team knew more about the app than us, of course, but they wouldn't claim they knew more than the original guys on the team. So those guys would still act like, you gotta make sure you run it by me before anything goes in, and we didn't even bother to do that. We just said, no, the BAs are our domain model experts, and that's how we're treating this. So we actually got the project manager to put out top 10 lists. It was a shared document on the server, and people just pluck off things that they're gonna work, and we told them we're gonna do weekly builds, and if these guys that go off and do the little skunk works things for a month and a half, guess what, your changes just didn't get into the weekly build because you're off doing your thing, and your code is very, very stale. So we would demo the changes back to the domain model experts before each meeting. We did do pair programming, and that really helped the Fargo guys learn about the application, but in turn we tried to help the per se guys learn about XP. So we were probably very annoying to them, but oh well. We had the daily and weekly stand-up meetings. These sometimes got ridiculously long and kind of a waste of time, but at least it did hold people accountable. So again, you know, when we were doing the frequent builds, we had the per se programmers. You know, we tried to get them to change and submit things more frequently. And again, out of those 7 programmers that were on the original team, 3 of them actually converted to our way very quickly. The other 4 were a little more stubborn, but they could see we were starting to gain some ground, so I think they were starting to loosen up after a while. Test-driven development. This was the first project I had ever really done with anything like this. James had done some SUnit framework stuff on his HL7 interface testing. I think he maybe did that while we were still at Banner. And then he ported the HL7 stuff to the Business One application. He had some HL7 set up in there. I was a part of this part of the application that they call the billing engine. It was part of a workflow thing, so this is where all the billing takes place and all these crazy domain objects. You know, I also learned the object model, which was huge. And so I was kind of working in there, and I suppose after about 3 months, the one fellow I was working with, he's one of the more senior guys, and he said, hey, I gotta go work on this other thing. I want you to implement this thing called interim billing. And by the way, get it working, but don't break anything that used to work. I'm like, oh really? So I don't even know how anything works. You know, how am I not gonna break anything? So basically, after that conversation, I went to James' office and said, James, I think I gotta start doing SUnits. I think I just have to get this going. How else am I gonna get a grip on what's working if I have no proof of what works? You know, these bills that you have to create a patient, you have to create a visit, you have to add charges, you have to do the coding, you have to do all this crazy stuff. I mean, it would take, just to do it by hand on a test to create a claim would take you 15 minutes. And now I had to, this interim billing is a way of billing someone while they're still in the hospital. So you still use a lot of the code that's there, but you're going to be in there in the guts of stuff where you know you're going to break some stuff. So that's what I did. I just started creating S units, and I actually got some scenarios from the business analysts in the QA department. I said, listen, when you guys test billing, how do you know if something's working? Well, they gave me these scripts. So I just started writing a bunch of S unit code that could create the patient, that could create the visit, that could create the charges, that could do the stuff. And next thing you know, I had a bill. I had a claim. And I was just like, well, this is awesome. You know, I mean, it's like, we can like test everything. You know, these manual QA things that they're doing, we now can automate all this. Well, what was really funny is when I started doing this, my tests were failing. And I was like, well, okay, obviously I don't know what I'm doing because these tests are failing. So I started talking to the BAs and I said, okay, now I'm trying to test this stuff and check for these, values or how many charges or dates, and they're not coming back right. What's wrong? Well, I don't know. And so actually what I was finding bugs. It was buggy. And so I had to go back to the guy that told me not to break anything and say, hey, I got these tests. And he goes, well, what are you doing writing tests? I said, well, you told me not to break anything. So obviously I have to see, what's working or not. And this isn't working. And so after about the fifth call, he wasn't really liking me doing what I was doing. And about a week and a half later, I got a call from him, our boss, and the QA manager. And they're all going, why are you writing tests? And I said, well, how else am I going to know if I'm doing it right? He told me not to break anything. Might as well just eyeball it, So actually, I started, I just said, listen, we have a mechanism here that can automate all this stuff, and we can now find bugs. And I haven't written a lick of code for this interim billing, but I've already gotten 5 bug fixes on the docket. So this is pretty cool. And of course, Ricardo was going, I told you to start that a week ago, we haven't done anything. And the QA manager is like worried that you're going to wipe out my department. And the manager, he actually just said, well, Krieg, I like a guy with conviction. Go for it. So anyway, I said, great, good meeting. So currently, we went for it, and we actually started automating all these scripts and stuff. And today we have over 1,700 automated tests for QA. Now, we're not doing everything test-driven development. Like, not every method has a S unit for it, but we have lots of scenarios. So just lots of scenarios. So we do have some unit tests, but we have lots of scenario tests, and this is pretty much our primary source of QA. And of course, the make it work, make it right, make it fast. Again, we got things out quickly, get feedback, and we performance tune as needed. And the SQL Server has a pretty nice profiler tool, so you can see all the SQL going back and forth and time it and see what's going on there. So how do we change this environment? Well, James did a lot of work on the runtime building environment. They had their own homegrown tools to get things off their hard drives and their own repositories and push them up to the main repository. And they liked them because he wrote it, but we didn't like it very much because it was just strange. Once we went to Visual Age, we went Envy, and we just said, listen, we're going to have one repository and one server. Everyone's logging in on this thing, and that's how we're doing it. And believe me, this is the short version. This was fight, kicking and screaming all the way, but eventually they gave in. I started preaching S units like crazy because there was I hit something. Okay, I think I'm on again. So yeah, the S units, there were some things that we didn't have S unit tests for, we didn't have very coverage on, and I wasn't sure how to get it working, so I relied on the experts that knew those areas of the application so we could get them going, so we would be able to touch every area of the application with automated tests. And the QA and business analysts, they were noticing it. I mean, we could pretty much promise once we had a test for it, a fix would stay fixed. There was no more of this, it worked last week, but not this week. It worked. And that was our promise. Per se programmers, they were getting singled out for writing buggy software. And because of this, they started to change. They needed a buy-in from witnessing the results from the Fargo team. The weakest links were not creating tests, and the QA staff pointed out those modules were the most problematic. And in stand-up meetings, they shamed others to start using the S units. Okay, so we actually got that existing customer to convert it to the new application. And when we did that, we weren't going to do patches, we weren't going to do this quarter release. When there's a problem, we put out a new runtime in a hurry. And we had to prove that the S units were a reliable source of QA. They found a problem, we have a fix. The QA manager wanted to hold up our fix for a week and a half so they could do manual testing. And I argued with her relentlessly on this, and I said, listen, our S unit tests take a little over an hour to run, and it's a lot more consistent than having your group eyeball it. And eventually, she gave in on that. So the small frequent builds were wonderful, and the automated QA was great. Currently, we've added 4 more hospitals. I've had the same job for the last 6 years, but I've switched employers 3 times. So per se sold the application to Bulldog IT in 2003, and when they did that, the non-S unit testers didn't make the cut. So they started getting a little more lean. A couple years later, Bulldog IT sold to Renaissance. They trimmed the fat a little bit more. And then Renaissance, they actually had 3 hospitals, still do, using the application, and then all of a sudden they decided they did not want to be a software company, and so they just said, well, I'm going to take 4 people, a couple support people, a couple programmers, and the rest of you are fired. And that was in 2006. And Wood County Hospital, who was one of the hospitals that had the software, they called about an hour after we got fired, so I guess if you're unemployed, you can handle it for an hour. You're still mad though. So I've been with them for 6 years. In those 6 years, we've done over 360 software releases. Just last year, they almost kicked our application out for my friends from Cerner, who crushed our first application. They went Cerner at the hospital for all their clinical needs, and they said, no, but we're keeping B1 because it's working great. Hospital's making a ton of money, we're getting claims out the door, we're getting payments, paid promptly. It's wonderful. But then next thing you know, 2 months later, they said, well, Cerner gave us a deal we can't refuse. And so I was like, okay, here we go again. But all of a sudden, about 2 months before they're going to install, the billing manager came up and just said, Tim, we've seen their billing system, it's horrible. And I said, yeah, I told you that a year ago. I pretty much gave it the fight. We gave it a good battle, but it was going down. And she said, well, do we have to go? And I said, no, keep it. And so actually B1, the 2 guys in the Fargo office, we won that battle against Cerner, so yay for us. Yay for Smalltalk. Then this last application, I'm going to tell you about it. That video rental application, that actually lasted for just about 9 years. And then finally, people don't go to stores to rent movies anymore. So the owner there sold the business, and he got a new business, but he didn't have any software for it. And so he called me up and he goes, Tim, it's your lucky day. I said, oh yeah, what's up, Marty? And he just goes, I want to give you money. I said, oh, do I have to do anything for it? But anyway, he said he wanted a new application. And he said he wanted a web application. And he needed it for, he started a new business where he would, it's almost like a pawn shop module, but it's not considered pawn shops. So he takes in used movies and games, and so he'll pay money out, and that's how he gets his inventory, and then he'll resell them. And they had some point of sale software, but it just was clunky and not fitting their needs, so he wanted to write software again. James partnered with me on that last project. So I talked to James about it, and he goes, yeah, you should do it. I said, yeah, I don't know how to web program. So I got some books on HTML and JavaScript and CSS and all that stuff. And then from there, James did help me get started with the Squeak image with Seaside on it. And currently there's 3 glass installations for the movies and games model at VidCycle Cyber POS. And then we also have a spin-off from that model that's for a used healthcare equipment business. And this is called Project Hero. They don't pay for anything, so they get things donated. So the model of workflow is a little bit differently, but it's close enough where, again, I'm only supporting one version of source code, but there are 2 separate applications in here. This kind of just gives you a little idea. The Cyber POS, this is the point of sale editor. So someone's buying Spider-Man for $3.99, and you can void it, or you can make it a return, and you can add the payment. And the tax, that's how much it is. Then you have the various tabs, so you can do the same for purchases, reservations, there's some reporting, and then under management tab, there's some setup stuff there. And then this is the Hero application. Again, not as many tabs, but here, this is where you do a donation. Someone donated a wheelchair, and they say its value was $200. They have to keep track of the value of their application. So again, this is not the same as other applications. So how do you design this? Well, the only way we know how. So basically, I got the domain model expert, the business manager again. I had her fill out top 10 lists, and we do frequent builds, and I'd demo them back to her, and she'd just be so excited. I mean, she didn't think people actually wrote software. She thought you just bought it. She didn't believe that someone could just come and start writing software. And it was just kind of fun. Like after the 3rd or 4th time, I'd go back to her and she'd like see her ideas come back to life. I mean, she thought she was building it. Look what we did. This is awesome. So I could just see the excitement. It was fun going back to her and meeting her. And again, you can challenge the people, the domain model experts, if you don't think their idea is solid. But you definitely want to make sure the things that are on the top 10 list are what they want to see. Otherwise, it's like, great, you did that, but it's not really what I want, don't really care about that right now. So again, small, frequent, incremental releases. I do them weekly, monthly. Again, get them out fast. If there's a problem, not many things to investigate. So after we meet, within a month, there's new runtimes out there. Again, make it work, make it right, make it fast. You just do this after things are working. And again, I ran the store, the original store we put it in. They've been using the system for over 2 years. And it took a year, and all of a sudden, some searches are taking longer than what they used to. There was never a problem. And it's like, oh, well, yeah. So, I sent James an email. He was like, hey, you got to check out this performance monitor, And so got that installed, ran the performance monitor, and it's really nice. It shows you a Smalltalk stack, and it shows you the timings of each method you're running, and you look in there and you go, oh shoot, yeah, I'm not indexing there, And so it was not something I would have thought of right away, but in the end, you can find it. So, that's my story.
For some of the apps that had more complex user interfaces, did you have anyone on staff or use the services of someone that was a user interface expert or had some talents in that area? Or did you just kind of all do it as a development thing?
As far as the content that
The aesthetics, the layout, the flow.
Yes and no. I mean, again, we never like went outside the organization and got some, you know, layout expert to look at our stuff and the ergonomics of how everything is. Basically, again, we count on the demand model experts. They're our bosses. If they said thumbs up, it went out, you know. So yeah. I don't know if anyone else has any XP stories they want to share or anything like that. Feel free to do that, or we can chat later about it. But yeah. Okay, thank you.
See you all down by boat and tent.